The morning after the storm, the farm felt fresh and alive. The soil looked darker, the air smelled clean, and the sunlight seemed brighter than usual. Daniel stepped outside early, as he always did, to check the fields. The ground still held lines of water that shimmered in the light, and the leaves of the apple trees looked washed and healthy. Tola stood near the porch, watching him. She had risen early too, though she had stayed inside the front room until she felt the air warm enough to step out. Her blanket was folded neatly on the chair, showing that she treated the room with respect, not as a place she simply entered. Daniel lifted a hand in greeting. "Good morning," Tala nodded. "Good morning. Land happy today?" Daniel smiled. "You can tell that?" She pointed toward the ground. Soil darker. Water sits right. Plants straight again. Storm gave strength. Daniel looked again, realizing she saw details he often missed. "You're right," he said. Tala's eyes softened, pleased that he trusted her judgment. Over the next week, Tala's presence on the farm became part of daily life. She helped Daniel feed the animals, carry water, and check the fences after the storm. She walked across the fields with quiet confidence. Reading the land with the instinct of someone whose childhood was full of nature, Daniel enjoyed working beside her. She didn't speak constantly, but her silence was gentle, not heavy. Sometimes she hummed soft melodies, old songs her family taught her long ago. Daniel didn't know the words, but the sound brought peace to the air around them. On the third morning after the storm, Tala noticed that one part of the field held water longer than the rest. She crouched to examine the soil and found that the ground there was sinking slightly. "This place weak," she said. "Needs support?" Daniel knelt beside her. "Maybe the ground shifted from the rain?" Tala nodded. "We fix it. Use stones around edge. Make it stronger." Daniel agreed, and together they began moving smooth, sturdy stones from a nearby pile. Tala lifted them with surprising strength despite her small frame. She placed them carefully in a circle, pressing them into the soil so the edges held firm. While she worked, Daniel found himself admiring the way she approached each task with purpose. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She treated the land with the same respect she treated people. By afternoon, the weak spot looked stable again. Daniel stepped back and admired the work. "You really know what you're doing," Tala shrugged lightly. "My people learned long before books. Land taught us. I just remember—" Daniel nodded. "I'm glad you're here." Tala paused. Her eyes lifted to his face, surprised but warmed by the words. "I'm glad too," she said softly. As days passed, the people in town began to notice Daniel coming in more often for supplies. He no longer hurried through the aisles with tired eyes. There was a calmness about him, a quiet steadiness that seemed stronger than before. The shopkeeper even commented once, "You look different, Daniel. Happier." Daniel wasn't a man of many words, so he simply offered a small smile. "Life changes sometimes," he said. He didn't mention Tala, not because he wanted to hide her, but because he wanted to protect her until she felt safe enough to meet others. One late afternoon, while Tala prepared herbs near the porch, Daniel approached her with a thoughtful look. "There's someone in town I'd like to speak to," he said. "He knows a lot about history, old cultures. I think he might understand your story." Tala looked up, cautious. "You tell people about me?" Daniel shook his head. "Only if you want. But I want to make sure you have the right to stay here without worry." Tala held the herbs gently in her hands, thinking. "People don't always listen," she said quietly. "This one will," Daniel replied. "He respects the land and the people who lived here before." After a long pause, Tala nodded. "I trust you." Those simple words touched Daniel more deeply than he expected. Trust was something she did not give easily. He knew that. The next morning, Daniel drove into town and met with the historian, an older man named Mr. Henson. His office was filled with maps, books, and photographs of tribes who once lived in the region. When Daniel explained that someone from the Apache line needed help, Mr. Henson didn't hesitate. "Bring her to me," he said gently. "We will honor her story." Daniel returned home and told Tala about the historian. She listened carefully, her expression unreadable at first. Then, after a moment, she nodded. "I go," she said. "But you stay close." Daniel smiled. "Of course." They traveled into town together the next day. Tala wore her traditional bracelets, the symbols she refused to hide. She walked slowly beside Daniel, not afraid, but careful. The town was busy, with people talking, horses tied near posts, and children running by. Tala kept her gaze forward, steady and calm. When they reached Mr. Henson's small office, the historian stood up immediately. He greeted Tala with deep respect, not curiosity. "You carry history in your eyes," he said softly. "Your people deserve to be remembered." Tala looked at him, surprised by the kindness in his words. She spoke quietly about her family, the mountains they once lived near, and the traditions she still held. Mr. Henson listened without interrupting. He nodded often, writing notes not as records, but as pieces of a story he wanted to honor. When Tala finished, he spoke with a warm voice. "You belong here. This land holds your past. No one has the right to take that from you." Tala's shoulders relaxed, a small sign but powerful. Daniel felt relief wash over him. "So she can stay without trouble?" Mr. Henson smiled. "She has every right. And if anyone questions it, they'll speak to me first." Tala lowered her gaze with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. When they returned home, the farm felt different, safer, more permanent. Tala walked across the fields with a new confidence, no longer worrying that she would be forced to move again. She stood tall, her eyes open to the future instead of the past. That evening, Daniel sat on the porch while Tala prepared a small fire circle near the edge of the farm. She used stones to make a neat, round shape and placed dried herbs inside. Then she lit a small flame and sat beside it, humming an old melody. Daniel approached quietly. "What is this for?" Tala looked up. "For peace," she said simply. "My family did this every season. It means new beginning." Daniel sat near her, feeling the warmth from the small fire. "Does it help?" Tala nodded. "It keeps old pain calm. It reminds heart to keep walking." Daniel watched the little flame flicker, lighting Tala's face in soft orange. She looked more at home here than he had ever seen. "You're part of this farm now," Daniel said quietly. Tala's eyes turned gentle. "And you are part of my new story." Daniel felt his heart settle in a way it hadn't in years. Not because of romance or promises, but because he knew they had found something rare. A bond built slowly, carefully and honestly. A bond built from trust, as weeks turned into months. Daniel and Tala worked side by side through the changing seasons. She planted herbs her ancestors once grew. She taught Daniel how to read the sky more accurately, how to understand the direction of the wind, and how to care for the land in ways he had never learned in return. Daniel taught her how to manage the animals, how to repair fences, and how to use simple tools. They shared quiet meals, long walks across the fields, and peaceful evenings on the porch watching the sunset. The farm began to flourish in a way it never had before. New crops grew stronger. The soil held water better. Birds nested in the apple trees again. Neighbors passing by could see that. Daniel was no longer the silent man who lived away from everyone. He was steady, grounded, and at peace. And Tala, once a woman hiding in an old shed, now walked the land with confidence. No longer looking over her shoulder. One calm evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, Tala stood beside Daniel near the fence line. The air was warm, carrying the soft scent of grass and earth. "This place changed me," she said. Daniel looked at her. "You changed this place too," Tala thought for a long moment. Then she said, "Alone life is heavy. Together, life is lighter." Daniel nodded. "I feel that too." He didn't need to say anything more. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was peaceful. Full of understanding, the farmer who once lived alone had found someone who understood the land as deeply as he did. And the last Apache, woman left behind, had found a place where she didn't have to hide. Together, they built not just a farm, but a home, one shaped by trust, respect, and quiet companionship. A new life for two people who once walked alone. Morning arrived softly at Jacob Warren's ranch. The sky turned from dark gray to pale gold, and a thin layer of frost covered the ground. The winter sun rose slowly, touching the tops of the cottonwood trees with a cold light. Jacob stepped out of his house just as he always did, hat on. Boots firm on the ground, but something felt different today. For the first time in years, he was not alone. He walked toward the barn, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. A part of him wondered if the women were still there or if the night's safety only been a brief stop before they continued their difficult journey. But when he opened the barn door, he saw them sitting together, awake, their blankets wrapped tightly around their shoulders. The warm smell of hay filled the barn, and the horses seemed calmer than usual, as if they sensed the gentle presence of the visitors. The oldest widow stood up politely when she saw Jacob. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Morning," Jacob replied with a soft nod. "Did you sleep all right?" There was a short silence. Then the second woman answered, "Better than we have in many days." Jacob felt something tighten in his chest, sympathy, respect, and a deep understanding of their strength. He rubbed his hands together to warm them. "Come to the house," he said. "I'll make breakfast." The women looked unsure. They had accepted shelter last night, but stepping inside a stranger's home felt like a bigger step. Jacob noticed their hesitation. "You're my guests," he said gently, "and the house is warmer than the barn." Slowly they agreed. One by one they followed Jacob, walking carefully across the frosty ground. The morning air was cold enough to sting their faces, but the sight of the small wooden house, smoke drifting from the chimney, brought them a sense of comfort they had long forgotten. Jacob opened the door and stepped aside to let them enter first. Inside, the house was modest but clean. A small fireplace crackled with warmth. A wooden table sat near the center of the room, and Jacob's old rocking chair rested in the corner. The women looked around with quiet respect, understanding that this space meant something to him. "Please sit," Jacob said. They took their places at the table while Jacob moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. He cracked eggs, cut bread, and warmed beans in a pan. The smell slowly filled the room, making the widows straighten in their chairs. It had been a long time since they had smelled a simple, home-cooked meal. As he cooked, Jacob spoke softly, not wanting to make them feel pressured. "If you don't mind," he said, "I'd like to know your names." The oldest widow touched her chest gently. "My name is Naya," the second woman said. "I am Tala." The third, a little younger, offered Lena. The fourth spoke softly, Mira. And finally, the youngest lifted her eyes with a shy expression. "My name is Sanny," Jacob smiled, kind, warm, and sincere. "It's good to meet all of you." When the meal was ready, he placed the food on the table. He did not sit right away. Instead, he waited until they served themselves first. Only after they insisted did he take a seat. Their manners, their gentle movements, and their quiet voices made the house feel peaceful in a way Jacob had not felt for many years. As they began to eat, Naya spoke again. "We didn't expect kindness like this," she said. "It has been a long road." Jacob nodded slowly. "You don't have to explain anything if you don't want to. But you're safe here." The women exchanged a look, heavy, thoughtful, filled with memory. Tala placed her cup down and said, "The hardships in our village grew over time. Some seasons gave little food. Some families left to find work. We stayed as long as we could, but everything changed." Jacob listened without interrupting. He understood that each woman carried a story of loss, but also a story of survival. Their decision to leave had not been easy. "We didn't know where to go," Lena added. "We only knew we had to keep moving." "You made it through a lot," Jacob said gently. "You're strong." The youngest woman, Sanny, looked down, embarrassed by praise. Her hands tightened around the cup she held. Jacob noticed her quiet nature and softened his tone even more. "You all survived together," he said. "That says a lot." Peaceful silence filled the room after that. They continued eating, appreciating every warm bite. When breakfast was done, Jacob stood and began clearing the dishes. But Naya quickly rose as well. "Let us help," she said. "You're guests," Jacob replied. Naya shook her head. "Guests can help too." There was no arguing with her gentle firmness, so Jacob allowed it. Soon the kitchen was filled with the sound of quiet movement, the clinking of cups, the soft rhythm of washing, and the low hum of conversation among the women. Jacob watched them for a moment. He had lived alone for so long that he had grown used to silence. But now, hearing even the smallest sounds of company felt like sunlight warming an old, forgotten door in his heart. After the dishes were done, Jacob stepped outside to continue his morning chores. He expected the women to rest inside, but to his surprise, they followed him out. "You don't need to work," Jacob said kindly. "We want to," Tala replied. "Work keeps the mind clear." Jacob understood that too well. Work had been his companion for years, so he assigned small tasks, nothing heavy, nothing difficult. Myra fed the chickens. Sandy brushed the horses gently, her movements soft and careful. Lena carried water from the pump. Naya swept the porch. Tala helped Jacob repair the fence near the corral. As the morning warmed, Jacob studied them quietly. They moved with a natural rhythm, helping each other without needing to speak. Their presence changed the ranch not loudly, not suddenly, but slowly, like sunlight spreading across cold ground. By midday, Jacob felt something he hadn't felt in years: companionship. They gathered for lunch under the weak winter sun. Jacob prepared a simple stew, and the women sat around him on old benches. The desert stretched around them, empty and quiet. But the ranch felt alive. After the meal, Nia looked at Jacob with calm, steady eyes. "We are grateful for everything," she said. "But we do not want to be a burden." "You're not," Jacob replied. "The ranch has room." "Even so," Tala added softly, "we know we cannot stay long." Jacob felt a small tug in his chest, something like disappointment, though he hid it well. "You can stay as long as you need," he said. "This land has helped many. Let it help you too." The women looked at one another, unsure of how to respond. They were used to being strong for themselves, not receiving help from strangers. Yet Jacob's kindness was simple, not demanding, not heavy, not shaped by conditions. It came from a quiet place of honesty. Later in the afternoon, as the sun began to fall behind the hills, Sandy approached Jacob near the corral. She held a small piece of cloth in her hands, embroidered with soft colors. "This is from our village," she said shyly. "We give it to people who show kindness." Jacob accepted it gently, touched by the gesture. "Thank you," he said softly. "I'll keep it safe." Sandy nodded and stepped back, comforted by his sincerity. As evening arrived, Jacob warmed the house again and prepared another simple meal. The women helped without needing to be asked. They set the table, chopped vegetables, and stirred the pot. Their movements brought warmth to the small home, not only through work, but through presence. When dinner was served, the house glowed with firelight. Shadows danced on the walls, and outside the cold wind moved through the trees. But inside, everything felt peaceful. After the meal, the women shared stories, not of pain, but of memories. They spoke of songs they used to sing as children, of the way their old village smelled in summer, of the laughter they once heard during gatherings. Their voices were soft, but filled with life. Jacob listened, smiling quietly. He realized he had not heard warm, gentle stories inside this house for many years. Each word felt like a crack opening in the heavy walls of solitude he had built around himself. When night finally arrived, the women prepared to sleep, some in the barn where it was warm and familiar, others in the rooms Jacob had cleaned earlier. Before they rested, Nia spoke again. "Your kindness has given us strength," she said. "Tomorrow, we will talk about what comes next." Jacob nodded slowly. "Whatever you decide, you'll have my support." As the women went to rest, Jacob stood alone in the doorway for a moment, looking at the quiet ranch. The cold night wind moved across the land, but inside him, something warm had awakened something he thought had been lost long ago. He whispered to himself, almost surprised by the truth of the words. This house was empty for too long. And somewhere in the barn, 5 women who had walked through hardship finally slept peacefully, trusting that tomorrow might offer more than survival. It might offer a new beginning. The next morning came with a soft glow spreading across the desert sky. Frost sparkled on the grass, and a thin mist hovered around the cottonwood trees. Jacob Warren stepped outside, breathing in the cold winter air. The ranch felt strangely peaceful, as if the land itself understood that something important was happening. Inside the barn, he heard gentle voices, Nia, Tala, Lena, Mira, and Sandy speaking softly as they prepared for the day. When Jacob entered, they looked up and greeted him with warm smiles. The change in their faces was almost unbelievable. Only 2 days earlier, fear and exhaustion had weighed on them. Now, there was a small spark of hope. "Good morning," Jacob said, tipping his hat. "Good morning," they replied together. Jacob noticed how naturally they fit into the ranch's morning rhythm. Mira was brushing the horses again, moving with patience and care. Sandy was feeding them, humming a soft tune. Lena was checking the chickens outside, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders. Tala and Nia were preparing to fetch water. He watched them for a moment, his chest warm with quiet appreciation. They worked as if they had lived here for years. After breakfast, which Naya helped him prepare, the women gathered around the table. The air felt gentle but serious. Today, they would decide what to do next. Nia folded her hands and spoke first. "Jacob, we are grateful for everything you have done. You opened your home without knowing us. You gave us food, warmth, and safety," Tala added softly. "We know we cannot take advantage of your kindness." Jacob leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but thoughtful. "You're not taking advantage of anything. You helped with the chores. You brought life back into this place." The women exchanged a quiet glance. They understood Jacob's sincerity. They also understood the importance of standing on their own feet. "We must decide where our future belongs," Naya said. "We cannot wander forever." "What do you want?" Jacob asked. Silence settled for a moment. Then Lena spoke, her voice steady. "We want a place to rebuild our lives. A place where we can work, grow, and live without fear." Mira nodded. "A place with peace." Sandy looked down before whispering, "A place where we can stay." Jacob felt something shift inside him. He had lived alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to share a life with others. His voice was gentle when he finally spoke. "This ranch has more than enough land," he said. "More than enough rooms. More than enough space for all of you. If you wish to stay, you are welcome." The women stared at him, startled. They hadn't expected such a direct offer. Their eyes widened with hope, but also uncertainty. "We cannot stay for free," Tala said firmly. "We will work. We will help. We will earn our place." Jacob shook his head gently. "You are not burdens. You have already helped more than you know." Naya placed a hand against her chest, moved by his generosity. But her voice remained steady. "If we stay as partners. We will work this land with our hands. We will share the responsibilities." Jacob respected that. These women had strength in their hearts, quiet strength, built from years of hardship. He understood why they wanted to stand proudly. "Then we stand together," Jacob said. The decision was made from that day on. The ranch changed in ways Jacob could never have imagined. The winter days were still cold, but the ranch grew warmer with activity. Every morning began with shared chores, gentle conversations, and the soft rhythm of teamwork. Nia helped Jacob plan the work for each week. Her calm presence brought order to the ranch. Tal proved to be skilled with tools. She learned repairs quickly, helping mend fences, fix squeaky doors, and keep the buildings strong. Lena took charge of the garden behind the house, preparing it for spring. Even though the ground was frozen now, she planned each row carefully. Mira cared for the animals with a natural touch. The horses trusted her almost immediately, and Sandy, the youngest, surprised everyone with her ability to organize. She cleaned the house, arranged supplies, and brought gentle energy to the rooms. Jacob found himself smiling more often. He noticed that the house no longer felt too large. It felt right. Evenings were the best. They gathered around the fireplace, listening to the crackle of burning wood. The women shared stories about their old village's traditions, its music, the celebrations they once held. Sometimes they sang soft songs from their childhood. Their voices blended like warm threads weaving through the air. Filling the house with quiet beauty, Jacob rarely spoke about his past. But one evening he shared something small. "I used to dream of a family," he said, staring into the fire. "A home filled with life." Naya looked at him gently. "You have one now?" Her words touched Jacob more deeply than she knew. Weeks passed. Winter slowly softened. The days grew longer. Snow melted from the hills. The air carried the promise of spring. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, now felt alive. Neighbors noticed the change. Some were surprised. Some were curious. Some whispered quietly, wondering why 5 Apache widows lived with an old cowboy. But as time passed, the whispers faded. People saw how well the ranch was running. They saw the respect, the harmony, the peaceful cooperation. Respect replaced curiosity. One morning in early spring, a local family stopped by to buy hay. They left the ranch speaking kindly of the women and their hard work. Word spread quietly. Jacob Warren's ranch had become a place of strength and unity. Jacob himself changed too. He walked with more purpose. He laughed softly at small things. He spent less time staring at the horizon and more time planning the future. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence with Tala, he said, "I didn't know I missed company this much." Tala glanced at him with a small smile. "Solitude is strong, but shared life is stronger." Jacob nodded, understanding every word. As spring bloomed fully, the ranch came alive with color. Lena's garden sprouted green shoots. Mira cared for a newborn foal with careful hands. Sandy helped Jacob build a new storage shed. Nia wove soft cloth coverings for the windows to keep the summer sun out. Every corner of the ranch showed signs of their presence. One warm evening, after a long day of work, they gathered outside under the cottonwood trees. The sky glowed pink and orange. The breeze carried the smell of fresh grass. Nia looked around the ranch at the animals, the fields, the old house, and Jacob standing quietly near the porch. "This place saved us," she said softly. Jacob shook his head. "You saved this place," Mira added. "Maybe we saved each other." Jacob looked at them, 5 women who had walked through hardship, carrying only their courage and their hope. He realized that fate had not brought them to his ranch by accident. They had come at the exact moment he needed them most. Even if he had not known it. "I'm glad you stayed," he said. "So are we," Sani whispered with a shy smile. The sky continued to darken, stars appearing one by one. The group sat together, listening to the wind move through the trees. Nothing dramatic happened, no loud events, no grand speeches, only quiet understanding. And sometimes quiet understanding is the strongest bond of all. Summer arrived. The ranch flourished. The fields were green, the animals strong, and the house full of warmth and laughter. The women had kept their promise. They worked hard. Every day, side by side with Jacob. But more importantly, they brought life back into the ranch. They brought comfort, friendship, and a sense of belonging. Jacob, once a lonely cowboy who believed his story was already written, now woke each morning with gratitude. He no longer feared the silence of an empty house. He no longer spoke only to the wind. He spoke to people who cared for him. One late summer night, as they sat quietly after dinner, Nia placed a gentle hand on the table. "Jacob," she said, "this ranch is home now for all of us." Jacob met her gaze, his eyes warm. "Yes," he replied softly. "It is home." A word he had feared was no longer empty. In the years that followed, the ranch became known as a place of peace and unity. Travelers who passed through were welcomed with kindness. The widows and Jacob worked the land together, raised animals, grew food, and built a life that surprised everyone who knew their past. They were a family not by blood, but by choice. A family formed from kindness, courage, and the simple decision to open a door on a cold winter night. Jacob Warren would often look across the land, watching the women laugh and work, and whisper to himself, "I thought solitude was the end of my story." But it was only the beginning.